What if the man everyone laughed at was the only one who could save them? What if the mocked, exhausted single dad mopping floors was secretly more powerful than the titans of industry who stepped over him without a second glance? This is the story of a man they called a loser, and the day they learned the devastating truth. Reese pushed the grimy mop across the polished marble floor, his reflection a tired, distorted smear. The squeak of rubber saws and the low hum of the building's HVAC system were the soundtrack to his life. Each night, he erased the footprints of important people, men and women who strode through these halls with a purpose he'd long since abandoned. His purpose now had a name, Chloe. She was 7, all bright eyes and missing teeth, currently tucked away in the small, windowless break room on the 4th floor, diligently coloring a picture of a unicorn for him. For her, he endured this. For her, he was just Dad, the strongest man in the world. To everyone else, he was the janitor. Invisible. An object of pity or, more often, contempt. Gideon, a junior executive with a jawline as sharp as his insults, was the worst. He swaggered through the lobby, his expensive shoes leaving deliberate scuffs on Reese's freshly cleaned floor. Still at it, Reese? Gideon sneered, not bothering to stop. You know, my 5-year-old nephew makes more in his allowance than you probably do in a week. Maybe you should ask him for a loan. Oh, wait, you're too busy being a hero to your little girl. The laughter of Gideon's sycophantic interns echoed behind him. Reese's knuckles whitened on the mop handle, a flicker of something cold and ancient stirring in his gut. He crushed it down. He was a father. Nothing more. He had to be. He finished the lobby and headed towards the elevators, his shoulders slumped not just from fatigue, but from the weight of a life he kept buried. That's when he saw him. An elderly man, impeccably dressed but with hands that trembled like autumn leaves, was backed against a decorative pillar by 2 large, menacing men in cheap suits. The old man's face was ashen with fear. I don't have it, the old man whispered, his voice cracking. I need more time, the larger of the 2 thugs chuckled, a low, guttural sound. Time ran out, Abernathy. The boss wants his answer. And his assets. From across the lobby, Gideon watched, a smug, predatory smile playing on his lips. This was a corporate shakedown, and he was enjoying the show. Reese felt that familiar, dangerous pull, the instinct to intervene, the one that had cost him everything once before. He tried to ignore it. He had Chloe to think about. He was just the janitor. But then the old man's terrified eyes locked with his. In Reese's weary face, he must have seen something, a glimmer of strength, a hint of the men who used to be. The old man, Mr. Abernathy, took a stumbling step towards him, his hand outstretched. The thugs tensed. Please, the old man begged, his voice a desperate rasp that cut through the sterile air of the lobby. He grabbed Reese's faded work shirt, his knuckles white. Please, pretend you're my son. The world seemed to slow. The hum of the building faded. The sneer on Gideon's face, the threat in the thug's eyes, the innocent drawing of a unicorn waiting for him upstairs, it all coalesced into a single point of decision. The janitor could walk away. But the man, the father, could not. A profound shift occurred in Reese's posture. His shoulders, perpetually rounded from exhaustion, straightened. His gaze, usually downcast, lifted and sharpened into something intensely focused, something that could strip a man's soul bare. He placed a steady, reassuring hand over Mr. Abernathy's trembling one. He looked directly at the 2 thugs, and for the first time in 5 years, he let the ice into his voice. There a problem here? He asked, the question not a plea but a command. The thugs were momentarily stunned. They saw a janitor's uniform, but they heard an authority that didn't match. This ain't your business, cleaner, the first one growled, recovering his composure. Walk away. Reese didn't even blink. He stepped forward slightly, shielding the old man with his body. He just told you it is my business, Reese said, his voice dropping lower, colder. You have a problem with my father. The word father hung in the air, a shield and a weapon. Gideon scoffed loudly from the sidelines, amused by the pathetic display. Oh, this is rich. The janitor is playing hero, but the thugs weren't laughing. They were professionals of a certain low caliber, and their instincts were screaming that something was wrong. The man in front of them wasn't afraid. He wasn't posturing. He was waiting. His stillness was more terrifying than any threat. Isla, the building's office manager, had come down to the lobby to sign for a late delivery. She stopped dead, watching the scene unfold. She'd always felt a quiet sympathy for Reese, had seen the way Gideon and others treated him. She'd also seen the profound love in his eyes when he looked at his daughter. But this man, this protector standing firm against two brutes, was someone else entirely. This was not the tired, invisible janitor. This was a sentinel. The second thug took a half-step forward, trying to use his size to intimidate. "Look, old man's son," he sneered, "walk him out of here before he gets hurt." "We have business with him," Reese's eyes narrowed. "Your business is concluded." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a verdict. He made a minute, almost imperceptible shift in his stance, balancing his weight on the balls of his feet. It was a duelist's stance, a predator's poise. The lobby security guard, a portly man named Stan, watched nervously from his desk, his hand hovering over the phone. He'd never seen Reese do anything but mop and smile tiredly. The lead thug decided to call the janitor's bluff. He reached out to shove Reese aside. The movement was a blur. Reese's hand shot out, not in a punch, but with an open palm. He didn't grab the thug's wrist, he met it, redirecting the man's momentum with effortless precision. The thug found himself stumbling sideways, thrown completely off balance, his arm tingling with a sharp, shocking pain from a perfectly applied pressure point. He stared at his hand, then at Reese, his bravado instantly evaporating, replaced by a primal fear. Who was this man? The second thug, seeing his partner neutralized so easily, froze. The cold authority in Reese's eyes now held a promise of swift, devastating violence. "Leave," Reese commanded. Now, they didn't need to be told a third time. Scurrying to help their partner, they practically fled the building, casting fearful glances back at the janitor who stood unmoving, a silent guardian. The lobby was quiet again, save for Mr. Abernathy's ragged breathing. Gideon stared, his jaw slack, his smug amusement replaced by utter disbelief. Isla felt her heart pounding in her chest. She had just witnessed the impossible. Reese turned his attention to the old man, the icy hardness in his eyes melting away, replaced by a gentle concern. "Are you all right, sir?" Mr. Abernathy nodded, leaning heavily against him. "Thank you," he breathed. I don't know what I would have done. My name is Elias Abernathy." He looked at Reese, truly looked at him, and saw the deep, weary lines around his eyes. "They want my company. That young man over there," he nodded towards a pale Gideon, his firm is behind it. Elias reached into his pocket. "I must repay you." Reese held up a hand, gently refusing the offered wallet. "You needed help. That's all." He squeezed the old man's shoulder. "Go home, Mr. Abernathy. Be safe." He then turned, picked up his mop, and with a quiet nod to a stunned Isla, he headed for the service elevator, his shoulders once again slumping into their familiar, weary posture. The janitor was back. But for everyone who had witnessed it, the image of the sentinel was burned into their minds. The next day, the atmosphere in the building was thick with unspoken questions. Gideon, desperate to reassert his dominance and erase the memory of his humiliation, doubled down on his cruelty. He found Reese cleaning a spill near the executive lounge. With a deliberate, calculated move, he kicked the yellow, wet floor sign, sending it skittering into Reese's bucket and splashing grimy water all over Reese's trousers. "Whoops," Gideon said with theatrical insincerity. "Clumsy me. You should be more careful where you leave your toys." Cleaner. Reese said nothing. He just knelt, picked up the sign, and began to sop up the new mess with a rag. The silence, the utter lack of reaction, infuriated Gideon more than any retort could have. He wanted a reaction. He needed to prove Reese was nothing. "You know," Gideon leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper, "I heard you have a daughter. Chloe, is it? Pretty name. She goes to that little public school down on Elm Street, right? Must be tough, raising a kid on a janitor's salary. A place like that, things can happen. It'd be a shame if something unfortunate occurred." A switch flipped. The temperature in the hallway dropped 10 degrees. Reese slowly rose to his feet, the rag dripping in his hand. He turned to face Gideon, and the janitor was gone again. The man standing there was terrifying. His eyes were flat, devoid of all emotion, like chips of obsidian. "Say her name again," Reese said, his voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, yet it carried the weight of an avalanche. I dare you. Gideon, for all his bluster, felt a genuine spike of fear. He saw a flicker of movement, a subtle shift in Rhys's body, and his survival instincts, buried under layers of privilege and arrogance, screamed at him. He took an involuntary step back. It's just an observation, he stammered, his bravado crumbling. No need to get sensitive. Isla appeared at the end of the hall, having heard the raised voices. She saw the confrontation, the raw menace radiating from Rhys and the fear on Gideon's face. Is everything all right here? She asked, her voice firm. Gideon used her arrival as an excuse to retreat. Everything's fine, he snapped, straightening his tie. Just having a chat with our janitorial staff. He shot Rhys one last hateful look and stalked away. Isla walked over to Rhys, her expression filled with concern. What did he say to you? Rhys's mask slipped back into place. The killer was gone, and the tired father returned. Nothing, Isla. It was nothing. It didn't look like nothing, Rhys. She placed a gentle hand on his arm. His muscles were corded with tension. You don't have to take that from him. He looked at her, and for a moment, she saw the crushing weight he carried. Yes, he said softly. I do. For Chloe, later that evening, after his shift, Rhys found Isla still at her desk, wrestling with a broken file cabinet drawer. He approached quietly. Let me see, he said. Before she could protest, he knelt, and with a few deft movements and a tool from his small personal kit, he realigned the track and fixed the mechanism. It slid open smoothly. She stared in amazement. How did you do that? He gave a small, sad smile. I'm good at fixing broken things. They stood in the quiet office, the city lights twinkling outside. Rhys, she began, her voice soft, that old man, Mr. Abernathy, he came by today. He wanted to find you. He said you saved him. I just stood there. Rhys deflected. You did more than that, she insisted. I saw it. I saw you. Who are you, Rhys? Really? He looked away, towards the window, towards the life he'd left behind. I'm Chloe's dad, he said, the words a shield he'd used for years. That's all that matters, but it wasn't enough anymore. Gideon had crossed a line. He had threatened the one thing Rhys had sworn to protect, and in doing so, he had awakened a man the world thought was long dead. The storm was coming. The final confrontation was inevitable, and it happened 2 nights later in the desolate quiet of the underground parking garage. Isla had worked late, finalizing payroll. As she walked towards her car, 2 figures stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. It was the same 2 thugs from the lobby, but this time, their faces were grim, their patience gone. Before she could scream, one of them clamped a hand over her mouth. We're not here for you, the men grunted, but you'll do as a message. From the shadows, Gideon emerged, his face a mask of cruel satisfaction. See, he sneered at Isla. This is what happens when people don't know their place. The cleaner should have stayed out of it. Upstairs, Rhys was finishing his final sweep. Chloe was in the security office with Stan, happily drawing, a small pair of headphones playing cartoons on a tablet. Stan was watching the monitors, his brow furrowed. Hey, Rhys, he called out. Something's not right down in P2. Looks like Ms. Vance is in some kind of trouble. Rhys was at the desk in a flash. On the grainy monitor, he saw it all, Isla, held captive. The 2 thugs. And Gideon, orchestrating the whole ugly affair. A cold, silent rage, pure and absolute, settled over him. He turned to Stan, his voice utterly calm. Stan. Lock this door. Do not open it for anyone but me. Call this number. He scribbled a sequence of digits on a notepad. Tell them Protocol Omega is active at the following coordinates. They'll know what to do. And watch over Chloe. Stan, seeing the look in Rhys's eyes, didn't question him. He just nodded, his hand already reaching for the phone. Rhys walked to the janitor's closet, but he didn't grab a mop. From a hidden compartment behind a loose panel, he retrieved a small, heavy, nondescript black bag. He didn't even look inside. He knew its contents by heart. He moved towards the stairwell, not as a janitor, but as a ghost. His footsteps made no sound. His movements were fluid, efficient, stripped of all wasted energy. Down in the garage, the thugs were trying to force Isla into a van. Gideon was pacing, high on his own power. Abernathy will sign over everything when he hears what we did to his son's new friend, he gloated. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness of the garage. She's not his friend, a calm voice stated. All four of them spun around. Reese stood there, about 20 yards away, bathed in the sickly yellow light of the overhead lamps. He was no longer the janitor. The slumped posture was gone, replaced by a perfect, balanced stillness. His eyes were the eyes of a wolf. She's mine, he finished. Gideon laughed, a shaky, uncertain sound. You. What are you going to do, mop us to death? The first thug started towards him, pulling a heavy wrench from his belt. You should have stayed upstairs, hero. Reese didn't move. He simply waited. As the thug swung the wrench, Reese flowed into motion. He sidestepped the clumsy attack, his hand striking the man's elbow with the force and precision of a surgeon's hammer. A sickening crack echoed in the garage. The thug screamed, the wrench clattering to the concrete. Before the second thug could even react, Reese closed the distance. It was a brutal ballet. A block, a strike to the throat, a sweep of the leg. The men collapsed, gagging and incapacitated. It took less than 3 seconds. Isla stared, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe. Gideon was frozen, his face a canvas of pure, unadulterated shock. The janitor, the loser he had tormented for months, had just dismantled 2 hardened criminals as if they were children. Reese's gaze fell on Gideon. He took a slow, deliberate step forward. You threatened my daughter, he said, each word a chip of ice. You brought this into her world. Gideon stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet and landing hard on the greasy concrete. Stay away from me, he shrieked, scrambling away like a crab. Who are you? Reese stood over him, a towering figure of judgment. I'm the man who was content to be invisible, he said, his voice a low growl. The man who just wanted to raise his little girl in peace. You couldn't leave that alone. Just then, the screech of tires filled the garage. The ramp was flooded with the headlights of 3 black sedans that screeched to a halt in a perfect tactical formation. Men in dark, tailored suits emerged, moving with a disciplined urgency that spoke of elite training. An older, sharp-featured man stepped out of the lead car and approached Reese, his expression a mixture of relief and stern respect. Commander, he said, his voice crisp. We came as soon as we got the call. Is the situation contained? Reese didn't take his eyes off the whimpering Gideon. Contained, he confirmed. Isla, now free, looked from Reese to the suited men and back again. Commander, she whispered. The older man gave a slight, formal bow of his head towards Reese. Ma'am. You are safe now. You're with Ronan Sterling, founder and commander of Aegis Global Security. The best private protection operator in the world. The name hung in the air, a bombshell that shattered every perception. Ronan Sterling. The legendary operative who had vanished 5 years ago after his wife was killed in a targeted attack meant for him. He had been presumed dead. Gideon's face went from white to gray. He had been threatening the daughter of the most dangerous man alive. The suited men efficiently rounded up the thugs and a terrified Gideon. As they cuffed him, Gideon looked at Reese, his eyes pleading. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know. Ronan, Reese, finally looked away from him, his expression one of utter disdain. That's the point, he said quietly. You should have been a decent human being anyway. He walked over to Isla, his entire demeanor softening as he checked her for injuries. Are you okay? She could only nod, her mind reeling. Ronan, she managed to say. He gave a weary sigh. It's a long story. But for the last 5 years, I've just been Reese. Chloe's dad. His priority shifted instantly. He turned to his second-in-command. My daughter is upstairs. Secure the building. No one talks to the press. And get Mr. Abernathy full-time protection. It seems he's an old client of ours after all. In the aftermath, the world realigned itself. Gideon and his employers faced a mountain of legal trouble, not just for corporate espionage, but for threatening the family of a man with limitless resources and powerful friends. The story ripped through the corporate tower. The janitor was a legend, a ghost, a king in hiding. But Ronan Sterling wanted none of it. He resigned from his post at Aegis, passing command to his trusted deputy. He had walked away from that life once for his daughter, and he would do it again. A week later, he wasn't mopping floors. He was sitting on a park bench, pushing Chloe on a swing. Isla sat beside him, their hands tentatively linked. The sun was warm on their faces. "So," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Aegis Global Security, huh?" "A little more intense than fixing my file cabinet," he chuckled, a genuine, relaxed sound she had never heard before. "The principles are the same. See a problem, fix it." He looked at Chloe, her laughter ringing through the air, and his expression was one of perfect contentment. "I tried to disappear, to give her a normal life. I thought being weak, being invisible, was the only way to keep her safe." "You were never weak, Reese," Isla said softly, her fingers tightening around his. "I saw your strength long before you ever threw a punch. I saw it in the way you looked at her. I saw it in your kindness." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a gratitude and affection that went beyond words. He was no longer hiding. He was no longer just the janitor or the commander. He was Reese, Chloe's father, and a man who was finally ready to build a new life, not in the shadows, but in the light. So, the next time you see someone the world has written off, someone quiet, struggling, and overlooked, maybe ask yourself a question. What battles are they fighting that you can't see? What hidden strength, what boundless love, lies dormant just beneath the surface, waiting for the right reason to be unleashed? Share this story if you believe in the quiet power of single parents, and comment below with a time you witnessed strength where no one else expected it.